Hello there. If you clicked on this video, you're either just starting with fly fishing or been fly fishing for a while, but you have some questions about tippet and tippet size and what it all means. Do I need nylon? Do I need fluorocarbon? So today we're gonna kind of go through that. Typically for trout fishing, I'm using 3 different sizes. I'm using the 5X, 4X, and 3X. That's typically what I use 99.9% of the time. Typically, tippet is used if you start cutting into this 9-foot tapered leader and it gets shorter and shorter after you have some knots or you're tying on fly after fly. You need to lengthen that back up to 9 feet, and that's where tippet comes into play, right? When you're tying tippet on a tapered leader, you can either go with the same size, right? In this case, this is a 3X, or you can go one size down. I can tie a 4X to a 3X tapered leader because I'm going lighter towards the end. I'm still creating a taper. If you go the other way, if I'm tying 0X, something heavier, it's gonna be tough to roll that fly out, and your breaking point's gonna be where the 2 lines meet, right? Because you have a heavier weighted line at the end of a lighter tippet. So you always wanna go the other direction, right? Go smaller diameter whenever you're adding length, or the same diameter whenever adding length to your tapered leaders. I hope that makes sense. So let's take a look in my sling pack on what I typically use when I'm trout fishing. And I carry a lot of sizes because you just never know. A lot of people have commented I probably carry too much gear, which is probably true, but I never want to be without, right? So I do carry a lot of gear to make sure I have everything to find success when I'm fishing. So I'm gonna pull a couple of different kinds out here. You can see this right here is a kind of a gold label and it says fluorocarbon. This right here is nylon. The difference between these 2 tippets, besides the size, nylon is a little more stretchy and floats better. Fluorocarbon is more abrasive resistant, it's clear, more translucent when in the water, and it sinks better. So if you're fishing a wet fly, a lot of times it's nice to go with fluorocarbon. If you're fishing topwater dry flies, then a lot of times it's better to go with nylon because it's gonna float better. Sometimes I do a little bit of both, right? My tapered leaders might be green, nylon, and I'll use a fluorocarbon dropper for whatever it is I'm running below that dry fly if I'm doing a hopper dropper setup. So really it all depends on what you want to do, but have both in your bag because you never know when you're going to need one or the other. So let's look at the X's right here. You can kind of see that says 4X. 4X is pretty much the standard size that you would use in trout. This is 8.4 pounds. The X stands for the diameter. So the higher the number, if you went with 5X, the thinner the diameter. So if you're starting to tie on these tiny little flies, a lot of times you have to go down to a 5X. It's lighter in weight, but it's also skinnier in diameter to be able to get it through that tiny little eye of the hook. It doesn't matter if you're fishing streamers, then you can go something really big. Let me see if I can find it here. If I go heavier, which in this case is a 3X, so the number is going down, that means the line thickness is getting thicker and the pound rating is getting heavier. Right, we started out with 4X at 8.4 pounds, 3X, heavier line, thicker diameter, is now at 8.9, 9.8 pounds. And as you continue to go lower and lower, so 2X is even heavier and thicker, 1X, even heavier and even thicker. A lot of times if you're using 1X, you're throwing some really big flies for some really big fish. Typically, when you're trout fishing, 2X or 3X is about the heaviest you need to go. Now I do have 5X in my bag. 5X is only 6-pound rating, but it has a really thin diameter. So if I'm tying on a number 18 parachute Adams, a lot of times you have to use 5X because it's a thinner diameter, and thinner diameter to be able to get into the eye of the hook. And a lot of times when fish are taking these smaller dry fly patterns, they'll be a little bit leader shy. If you have a big thick piece of leader laying on the water tied to a small fly, a lot of times fish are going to refuse that. So that's why you'd want to go with a lighter tippet, spookier fish, smaller flies. Now, as you can see, 4X also comes in a fluorocarbon. When do I use this? Typically, I'm using 4X fluorocarbon for my droppers. So if I have a dry fly, a big dry fly, and I want to have a nymph dropper, I'm usually using fluorocarbon because it sinks better. Or if I'm fishing some really toothy fish, cutthroat can get very toothy. A lot of times they can bite through nylon and start to chew that line up. With fluorocarbon, it's far more abrasion resistant. So sometimes it's good to go with fluorocarbon. The one thing you do have to remember with fluorocarbon, you have to work a little harder to seat the knots. Since they don't stretch, this line doesn't stretch as much as nylon, you gotta make sure you have a nice, tight knot when using fluorocarbon, because sometimes if it's not tight, they can come undone. So just a little note when using fluorocarbon. All right, well, I hope that makes sense when you're out there choosing the right tapered leader and now having a little bit better understanding of what to use Tippet for. All right, if you're new to fly fishing and need a little help with your cast, check out this video right here, 8 minutes, and I promise you, you'll get that line out just a little bit further than you are today. All right, everybody, till the next time, fish on.